Eric, how do you sum up the emotions after that one?
It isn't possible. I feel like I probably stepped up here far too early without letting that sink in a bit. I don't think you'd be hard pushed to see a game like that in a decade, I would say. And for where we were at half time to be where we are now is it's a phenomenal situation. I think it's real credit to everyone involved. The players first and foremost showed just an unbelievable level of togetherness and spirit and will to stay in the game, to get ahead in the game, and then to overcome what is a really tough blow to concede a goal like that at the end, and then the repeated ups and downs in the penalty shootout for us to ultimately come out on top in a game like that it's insane. And I couldn't be prouder of the group, how us as a whole, from the staff to the players, have responded to what is just repeated difficulty over the course of the game. I said to the players at the end, I don't think it could have been a more difficult game. We couldn't have made it more difficult for ourselves, almost from minute 1 to minute 90. When you think of how we start the game, the red card, conceding the goal late on, and then the number of penalty misses in the shootout, it almost could not have been more difficult. So I'm so pleased that we're in this situation. I think it will mean the world moving into the next game, and it has to mean something for us. It has to amount to a team in the next round that is so conscious of how it started the last 2 games, and so conscious of where it's been over the course of this series, and to arrive at this point now with everything to play for in a really good shape. Then we've got to capitalise on that, and we have to make sure that what happened in the semi-final last year doesn't happen again.
What was your message to the team at halftime?
I was. But I'm sure if you speak to the players, as visibly angry and disappointed as I've been in the group on account of how we started the game, and Rosales is sending off because we can lose to a good team in Seattle for sure, going toe to toe, but to shoot ourselves in the foot through the organisation on the set play that leads to Morris's incident and the second goal, and then for Rosales to do what he does in that moment is, as is clear to everyone, unprofessional, and it puts us in a real hole. And in a lot of senses, it's an easy message at halftime, because then you've got 20 other players in that room that have got to get him and us out of that situation. And Dennis just spoke really well about it in there. They did that. They've for a teammate, made his life far easier than it would have been in the coming days had we not won that, because I felt like we'd clawed some momentum back in the game. We'd done really well to overcome the disappointment of the opening stages, and I felt like we performed really well again in the sort of 15-20 minutes that followed that, and I would have felt really comfortable going into half-time at 2-1 down, that we'd be able to tip the game back in our favour. But obviously the red card really kills us. But if there's one thing that we can do, it's make life difficult through defensive organisation and compactness and discipline, and people carrying out a game plan, which I feel we did really well from that point onwards. And the big message at half-time was about staying in the game, taking it 5 minutes by 5 minutes, making sure that as we hit 70 minutes onwards, we were in a position to really compete and capitalise in the way that we did in the way that we've been so effective over the course of this year. So the players stayed on script. That's always the important thing in these moments. You don't have 3 players attacking the game and 7 players defending the game. We had to be really coherent in that sense, and I think we were. And the second half performance, I thought, was really, really good.
Eric, they make a goalkeeper substitution just before the end of that. Were you prepared for that possibility, and how much do you scout a backup goalie in that situation, thinking that it could go down to a penalty kick shootout?
No, we obviously, I listen to the opponent managers speak, of course, around the games, as do our analysts, and I've heard Brian talk about that a little bit, and I know he's been asked that by journalists in Seattle, given Fry's record on penalties, would that be something that they would consider? So it didn't come as a big surprise to us, and it's almost from that point onwards written that it's going to go one or two ways. The goalkeeper's going to be the hero or villain at that point, and unfortunately we're on the right side of that.
You won 2 of the 3 games in the series, of course, both in penalties. Is there part of you or part of the team that wishes that you did that in regulation for at least one of them?
100%, but I'd much rather. Well, it's easy to say, having won the game, that it was an enjoyable experience, but I can tell you that was not an enjoyable 20 minutes at the end of the game there. But we've had a really equal series of games against Seattle over the course of this season. We've had 5 games now, and all of which have been really tight, really cagey, really tactical. I actually really enjoy the games against Seattle. I feel like they're a team that plays at a really high level. You've seen that in the Club World Cup with the way they competed with some of the best teams in the world. I feel like they're real chess games. They're, I think, some of the highest level tactical games you'll see in MLS, and to an extent, tactics go out of the window when, or certainly in terms of how you planned when you're down to 10 men. We had to show one side of our game really, really well, and I felt we showed that. So I think moving forward, we've got to make sure that we are a really good version of ourselves, and I think everyone in this room that's watched us over the course of this season is not recognising the Minnesota that you've seen in the opening stages of the previous two games. So that's got to change quick. And I would also say it's the first red card we've had this year. We've been really disciplined in that sense, and that lack of discipline almost, it feels like it takes me back 18 months, and we've got to recapture that very quickly.
You know, thinking back to last year, you finished it in 2. You knew who your next opponent would be once the whistle blew. You don't know your opponent, and you still have 2 weeks. How do you make sure that you can carry the momentum, and what did you learn from the experience going into the Galaxy last year that you can use this year?
I think, given the format, if you could know that you would win the third game, you would choose to play the third game, because I feel like it helps you keep rhythm. It takes 3 weeks to 2 weeks, which is really important. Last year we obviously played Galaxy after a 3-week break, and it felt like a performance from a team that was really lacking in rhythm. Given the nature of the country and the time of the year, it's not easy to find on your doorstep an opponent that can fill a gap for you and help you keep some rhythm. So last year we had to be creative in that sense, and ultimately it amounted to a team that felt like it was well out of its rhythm. I think this time you're still contending with the fact that now we're going to lose, say, 5-6 players to the international break. They're going to come in with 2-3 days prep, maybe home, maybe away, depending on the result of tomorrow's game, and that's not an easy picture in any way. But I would much rather be stood here with a 2-week wait than I would be a 3-week wait in comparison to last year. So there's definitely something to take from that. And as I say, I think this sense of bubbling frustration that we've felt over the course of the last couple of games, and then the rhythm and the momentum that we'll get from winning in that way has to count going into the game in 2 weeks' time. So I'm really interested to see what version of us we see on that day.
En un juego que se superó mucha adversidad, desde tu punto de vista como coach, como entrenador, ¿cuál ha sido el aprendizaje? Porque se superaron, repito, muchas adversidades. Vendrá la reflexión más adelante, pero de momento, ¿cuál ha sido tu aprendizaje en un juego tan dramático como el de esta noche?
Para mí es decepcionante estar en esa posición, porque no refleja el Minnesota de verdad. No nos hemos encontrado en esa situación con mucha frecuencia ese año, sin tarjetas rojas, sin conceder muchos goles, particularmente en el primer mitad, y por eso lo que es importante ahora es reencontrar la mejor versión de nosotros mismos en ese sentido, y si podemos hacer eso, podemos competir con cualquier otro equipo, pero hoy contra un equipo muy bueno, un equipo contra que es muy difícil jugar, hemos hecho el trabajo mucho más difícil que es necesario, y obviamente contra equipos en esa etapa de la competición es imposible comenzar como hemos hecho hoy, y por eso es clave para nosotros ahora mejorar en ese sentido y enfocarnos mucho más en los primeros minutos.
In those moments where you're trying to pick the team up after they're down 2-0 or before the penalty shootout, after you've conceded, who are the players you sort of look to that are going to try to pick the rest of the team up, that everybody looks to?
Yeah, I think you could rattle them off in terms of the real steady presences that have got a number of games under their belt, really level-headed guys like Will Trapp and Boxall, and Robin, without being a really outspoken guy, leads by example, and I think he gave every drop that he had up until the point at which he was taken off in a couple of different roles, and you're looking to people to do that as much as you are to be the real vocal presences, and to push the group from that perspective. You also want to see it in action. You want to see guys that are literally going to war, but they're doing it in the context of a plan, and I think that's the important thing. It would have been very easy for us to, as I say, go off script very quickly, chasing a goal, and then 2 becomes 3, becomes 4, becomes 5, and the game's done. But I think we executed the plan really well, and that was on account of number one, how we were able to adapt to the shape change we make when Marcanic comes on, how seamlessly we can move into that shape with people like Will and Boxall with their level of organisation. And then I also think we're able to fortunately slip into a bit of a default in that sense. I think where we finished the game 5-3-1, it really suits us in the sense you've got a lot of players carrying out roles there that they were much more familiar with than they were when we were sort of 4-4-1 as we approached it immediately after the red card and in the opening stages of the first half. So I think it was a change that really helped us, but also you've got to then have players that are focused, dialed in every moment, and that extra man can sometimes be accounted for, I think, with 5% more effort, 5% more communication, keeps the team together really well, and I think we did a really good job. I don't feel like we rode our luck all that much given the circumstance. So I was really pleased with how the leaders stepped up, but also how people like Jeff Diaz, who's not a huge vocal presence, but is a real warrior and led by example there. And then you've got the obvious names on top of that.
¿Qué sabor tiene esta victoria, especialmente al haber eliminado al Seattle Sounders? ¿Y cuál es el mensaje a la afición que no dejó de alentar durante todo el partido?
Es interesante porque hemos hablado de Seattle en ese sentido, porque ellos es un equipo que sabe ganar, han ganado mucho en su historia, y hemos hablado antes del partido de la importancia de reflejar sus cualidades en ese sentido, just saber cómo ganar, y hemos probado eso completamente porque obviamente era una situación muy difícil, casi imposible, pero hemos superado en ese sentido y mostrado esa desesperación de ganar y encontrar una manera de hacerlo, y eso va a dar a la afición mucha confianza en nosotros, pero para nosotros es muy importante saber que podemos ganar a pesar de la situación.
When it comes to those last two goals, the second half goals, what were the kind of the things in the build-up or the goals themselves, the nuances that made those possible?
Our goals.
Yes.
It's a lot of the characteristics that we've shown over the course of this year on set plays. I think it sort of be keen to impress. I think up until that moment, I think we did a really good job on the ball in making it not a completely one-sided game from the perspective of possession and balance and territory. I felt like with 10 men we did an exceptional job at showing composure when we needed to, and working our way up the pitch slightly more slowly than you might expect given what we've done for most of this season. I think that was crucial in getting some of the set play moments that ultimately led to the goals. And then obviously Anthony's is very clean cut, of course, but the other, it's a series of moments where we build momentum and then ultimately capitalise in a messy way, but it reflects how effective we've been on the second, third, fourth phases of set play moments. And I always impress on the players, because even the players themselves, they can sometimes miss the moments that lead to the chances and ultimately where the chances have originated. And I think tonight certainly that second was a really good example of us building momentum and ultimately being really effective through a framework as opposed to anything that was written up and detailed, I suppose.
Very similar to what I was going to ask, but I guess now that you've taken another 15 minutes to reflect on what just happened, I'm just curious, when you think of the emotion of the shootout and then two goalkeepers both trying to do the debut thing, like just moments in your coaching career, where does this result stand?
Now, I probably try and make sure I look at both sides of the coin in that sense, because I was obviously, even in my own mind, as the penalties are going on and it gets to sort of silly territory beyond 6 and 7, you almost have to just enjoy those moments because they are so beyond your control. The game is unrecognisable relative to the game that I would have talked about in the build up to that, and I think I have to learn as a coach to just enjoy that it's well out of your control, and they're phenomenal moments to be a part of as a spectator, as a coach, someone who's got a front row seat to that sort of stuff, and I think you really have to learn to enjoy that. But then I'm also the type that will reflect in detail about some of the things that we did really well, I think, as a coaching staff in keeping the group level-headed, making sure that we had a a really suitable plan for the second half. Some of the changes we made, so I was really pleased with how we operated in that sense, and I will of course reflect as to how we started the game and where we need to really improve in that sense, and the players will play a big part in that. I think one of the things we do really well as a group of staff and a group of players is there's a really good connection there. We're very open with them, they're very open with us. We got some great characters in there that can really feed how we move forward from this point. So I'm just glad that we've got the fuel and we've got the momentum, and we'll put the nuts and bolts together over the course of the coming days. Thanks, guys. Thank you.